With the Edmonton Oilers losing their second round series to the Vegas Golden Knights, the Canadian Cup drought has now officially reached 30 years old. 30 years since the Cup has been won by a Canadian team, obviously the last one being won by the Montreal Canadiens back in 1993. Now this has been a pretty big topic over the past couple of days. I mean, it's always a pretty big topic when the last Canadian team is eliminated, but of course with it being its 30-year anniversary, it's even larger this year, I would say, and I've seen a couple of YouTubers already cover this topic. However, I kind of want to look at it in a different light because at least from what I've seen, those videos are mostly covering, the teams exactly how they are right now and their rosters and who's going to win the Stanley Cup next and all of that. But that's not what I want to look at. What I want to discuss today is, should this even matter? Like, as a Canadian fan, obviously the Canadian fan base in the NHL is probably a dominant fan base, or at least majority of the fan base in the NHL right now. But as a Canadian fan, without the Stanley Cup coming to Canada in so long, should that even matter? Before we do get into it though, if you guys are new to the channel and you like hockey content, please make sure to hit subscribe. I really would appreciate it. It feels like almost every single sports media outlet is covering this and saying how it's such a big deal for Canada. And I've also seen a few comments talking about how it almost feels like hockey is slipping out of the grasps of Canada. And I completely disagree, at least in terms of, it's not because of the fact that Canada hasn't won a Stanley Cup in so long. There are plenty of other issues that, you can talk about, obviously the Hockey Canada, SA accusations and all of that. I think that is the bigger issue on why maybe, that's kind of happening, but I'm not really going to talk about that too much in this video. I feel like that's a completely different subject. For me, I don't think that is an issue. I've also seen people, say it's because of Bettman and it's all Bettman's fault. I also disagree with that as well. Like, obviously you do want to make those Southern teams as profitable as possible, like a Florida and Carolina and Dallas and Vegas. Like, all of those teams, you want to try and give them a chance to win the Stanley Cup so they can make as much money as possible, because you know that the northern teams like a Boston and Buffalo and pretty much all of the Canadian teams are just going to support them whether they're bad or they're good. Like, it's just going to happen. But also at the same time, imagine how much money you could make if the Canadian team won the Stanley Cup, like the Leafs or the Canadians or the Oilers. Like, think about how many McDavid jerseys you would sell with a Stanley Cup final patch. It would be ridiculous. I really just don't blame Bettman for all of this. I mean, it's not easy to win a Stanley Cup, and also on top of that, it's not like a Canadian team has been that great for so long. Like, almost the best Canadian stretch that's happened since Bettman has entered the league is the Maple Leafs, and we know the Maple Leafs, they are cursed. There is something wrong with that team, so even if they have good regular seasons, they have a hard time getting out of the first round, and that's only happened this season. Although I will admit, if you are a Bettman hater, and it's not like I like Bettman either, like I don't, but if you think he is the cause of all this, he kind of gives you a lot to work with, considering no Canadian team has won since he's become commissioner. But I don't feel like it's some master plan. Like, do the Canadian teams get screwed over by refs? Totally. That Pietrangelo slash on Draisaitl in the last series there, that should have been a lot more than just one game. It probably should have been for the rest of the series. But at the same time, do the other American teams also get screwed over by refs? Yes, the same thing. Like, I think there is maybe a huge topic that can be discussed in another video where the reffing is just not really that great, but I don't think the reffing is bad because the NHL is rigged. I think it's just because of loose rules and maybe not defined as well as they should be, and the refs and game management and all of that. Like I said, it's a completely different video. I don't think it's because the NHL is rigged. Moving on from Bettman though, the one thing that I never really understood a lot was the whole Canada's team sort of thing. So when there is only one Canadian team remaining left in the playoffs, they're usually given the title of Canada's team and every Canadian should cheer for them. But for myself personally, I never really got that. Like, the Leafs are my favorite team, so if they lose in the playoffs, well, I guess I should say when they lose in the playoffs, I don't really care about the other teams as much, and I definitely don't care about the other Canadian teams as much because they're not my team. They're not the Leafs. Like, I just don't care about them as much. Like, for example, when the Montreal Canadiens beat the Leafs, then beat the Jets, then beat the Vegas Golden Knights, went all the way to the Stanley Cup final, I wasn't cheering for the Canadiens. Are you kidding me? I'm a Leafs fan. I was going for the Lightning. I wanted the Lightning to win because if the Canadiens won that series and won the Stanley Cup, they would rub it in the Leafs fans' faces all the time. I mean, they already do, like coming back from 3-1 deficit, and I don't blame them. That's their right, because if I was on the other side, like if the shoe was on the other foot, I would do the exact same thing. I just don't care about another team in Canada winning the Stanley Cup. In fact, more often than not, I'm probably cheering against them. There are a lot of rivalries in Canada. Like, as a Leaf fan, there's no way that I'm cheering for the Ottawa Senators or the Montreal Canadiens to win the Stanley Cup. The only cup drought that I care about is the Leafs one, and also the Flames one as well. They're my second favorite team, so, you know, we can add them onto it. But, like, for example, with the Edmonton Oilers, I'm okay with them. Like, the only reason that I would want the Oilers to win a Stanley Cup is because of McDavid. That's really the sole reason. He deserves it. He's the best player in the NHL. With the Winnipeg Jets, I could take or leave it. I really don't care that much about the Winnipeg Jets, to be honest. I'm probably cheering against them more often than not. Then with the Vancouver Canucks, I like them a little bit more, to be honest, but really still not a whole lot. The only teams in Canada that I care about winning a Stanley Cup is the Leafs and the Flames. Other than that, I just do not care. And I know some people kind of contribute it to like national pride and all of that, but it's not really a national thing for me. The way that I see it is, if you want to cheer for your country, use that on the Olympics and like the World Championships. Like, that's where you can use your world pride from. With the NHL, it doesn't really make too much sense to me, at least personally. Like, I feel like if it's a national pride sort of thing, it makes a little bit more sense to cheer for Canadian players and all of that. And of course, in 2019, the St. Louis Blues had a ton of Canadian players on their roster, and at least as far as I know, the Vegas Golden Knights have a lot of Canadian players on their roster. I think either the most in the NHL, or at least the most in the NHL out of the remaining teams. I just don't really see the whole national pride thing. Also, on top of that as well, like, yes, a Canadian team has not won the Stanley Cup in so long, but it's not like the Stanley Cup has not been in Canada. There are plenty of Canadian players who have brought the Stanley Cup to Canada, like Brad Marchand, Sidney Crosby, Nazem Kadri. The list goes on and on and on. And on top of that as well, the Stanley Cup is in the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is in Toronto. So the cup is usually in Canada most of its time. To me personally, this whole thing is blown out of proportion. I do not care if another Canadian team wins the Stanley Cup. The only Canadian teams that I want to win are the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Calgary Flames. And if both of those teams are out, I do not care. I honestly would probably rather not a Canadian team win the cup. But those are just my opinions there. But I would love to know if you guys disagree with me, especially if you are a fan from Canada. Even if you are a fan from the US or anything else, I would love to hear your opinion as well. But especially those fans from Canada, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe let me know what team you cheer for, and if you would care if, you know, that rival team, for example, if you're a Flames fan and the Oilers won a Stanley Cup, would you care? Would you celebrate just because it is a cup in Canada? Let me know in the comments down below. If you guys did like this video, make sure to leave a like and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure to follow me on my Instagram, my Twitter, and my TikTok. Links are all in the description down below. But like I said, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.